Right now, a single trip to the grocery store can cost more than an entire family spent on food in a week during the Great Depression. We are told there is nothing we can do but keep paying. But in 1933, with a quarter of this country out of work, our grandmothers fed whole families on almost nothing, and they ate well. They followed a set of kitchen rules that the modern food industry has spent decades teaching you to forget, because your forgetting is exactly how they profit. Today, I am giving 15 of those forgotten rules back to you. Use even half of them, and you will feel it in your very first grocery bill. There is a number that would have sounded like a fortune to a woman standing in a kitchen in 1933, $30. Adjusted for the way prices move, that is close to what a careful family spent on food in a week when a quarter of the country had no work at all. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud today. They did not just survive on it. They ate well. They sat down to hot suppers, to bread that filled the house with steam, to Sunday meals that made the children feel rich for an hour. We have been taught to picture the Great Depression as empty plates and thin soup. But the women who ran those kitchens did not see scarcity. They saw a problem with a solution, and the solution was strategy. They had a set of rules, passed mouth to mouth, across back fences and church basements, that turned almost nothing into enough. Those rules did not disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because an entire food industry makes far more money when you forget them. So today, I'm going to give them back to you. 15 meal rules our grandmothers used to feed a whole family on what most of us now spend on a single careless trip to the store. Stay until the end, because the 15th rule is the one that cost nothing at all. And it is the reason their families remembered those hard years as the years they felt most loved. Rule number 1, the pot that never emptied. In a Depression kitchen there was almost always one heavy pot on the back of the stove, and it was never truly finished. They called it perpetual stew, or the everlasting pot. A handful of beans in the morning. The water a few potatoes had boiled in. The last spoon of yesterday's vegetables. A bone with a little meat still clinging to it. Each day something went in, and each day a meal came out, and the pot grew richer instead of poorer. A modern family throws away the carrot tops, the celery ends, the chicken carcass, the liquid from the canned beans. A 1930s woman saw 4 more meals in exactly that. The rule was simple. Nothing that still holds flavor ever leaves this kitchen in the trash. Rule number 2. Stale bread was never old bread. A loaf going hard was not a loss. It was a second ingredient. The heels and the dry slices became bread pudding, sweetened with a little sugar and a single egg. They became the crumbs that stretched a half-pound of meat into a full meatloaf. They became French toast on a Sunday that tasted like a treat and cost pennies. Today, the average household throws out an entire loaf's worth of bread every week without blinking. In the Depression, that waste would have fed a child for 2 days. Stale bread did not get thrown out. It got promoted. Rule number 3. Beans were the family bank. If there was one thing a careful Depression pantry was never without, it was a sack of dried beans. Navy beans, pinto beans, split peas, lentils. They cost almost nothing. They kept for a year, and a single pound soaked overnight swelled into protein enough to anchor supper for 6. A pot of beans with an onion and a scrap of salt pork was a complete, filling, honest meal. They stretched the meat budget by replacing it 3 nights out of 7. The rule the grocery store would rather you forget is this: the cheapest shelf in the entire store is also the most nourishing. Rule number 4, the Sunday chicken lived 3 times. When a family could afford a chicken, that bird did not feed them once. It fed them across half the week. Sunday it was roasted, the centerpiece, the celebration. Monday the picked meat went into a pie or a fricassee with gravy and biscuits. And then the carcass, the bones most people now drop straight in the bin, went into a pot of water with an onion and simmered all afternoon into a golden broth that became Tuesday's soup. 1 chicken, 3 dinners. The bird was not a meal. It was a strategy that walked in the door. Rule number 5. Breakfast was the cheapest weapon they had. A child who started the day full did not beg for snacks that cost money the family did not have. So breakfast was built from the cheapest filling foods on earth: cornmeal mush, fried in a slab the next morning; oatmeal that stuck to the ribs until noon; milk toast, which was nothing but warm milk poured over bread. And yet it warmed a cold child on a winter morning for almost nothing. They understood something we have forgotten. A full stomach in the morning is the cheapest way to protect a whole day's food budget. Rule number 6. They grew food from garbage, on windowsills and in coffee tins. In the smallest city apartment, Depression families regrew what most of us throw away. The white root end of a green onion, set in water, grows back again and again. The base of a head of celery sprouts new stalks. A sprouting potato becomes a whole new plant. Herbs grew in cans on the fire escape. It was not a hobby. It was free food, multiplying on the windowsill, and it cost only the patience to notice that the scrap in your hand was not waste, but a seed. Now, before I give you the 7th rule, I want you to remember something, because rule number 11 is the one most people today would find almost impossible to do, and yet it was the single habit that did the most to keep these families fed through the worst of it. Hold on to that. We will get there. Rule number 7. Fat was not the enemy. It was survival. A 1930s cook guarded her fat like money. Every time bacon was fried, the grease was poured off into a tin by the stove and saved. That fat fried the potatoes, greased the pan for cornbread, seasoned the beans, and added the calories a working body needed to get through a hard day. Lard was cheap, and lard made a flaky pie crust and a rich biscuit out of flour, and almost nothing else. We have been sold 100 expensive bottles and sprays to replace what our grandmothers got for free from their own frying pan. The rule was, you never pour away a single thing that carries flavor and keeps a body warm. Rule number 8. The soup bone fed like a roast. Walk up to a butcher in 1933 and ask for a soup bone, and he would hand it over for pennies, sometimes for nothing at all. To us it looks like a scrap. To a Depression cook it was the foundation of a feast, simmered for hours with an onion, a carrot, and a handful of barley. That bone gave up marrow and flavor, and turned a pot of water into a deep, beefy, filling soup that fed the whole table. The most expensive cut on the counter and the cheapest bone behind it came from the same animal. She knew which one her family could afford, and she made it taste like the other. Rule number 9. One egg could stretch a whole meal. Eggs were the quiet workhorse of the Depression kitchen. Not because they made a meal on their own, but because one egg could turn a little into enough. An egg bound a meatloaf, so a half-pound of beef fed the family. An egg turned leftover rice and a cup of milk into a baked pudding for dessert. An egg and some flour and water became noodles, rolled and cut by hand, that filled out a thin broth into a real supper. They did not ask what an egg could be on its own. They asked what an egg could stretch. Rule number 10. The potato was the honest filler. No food did more for a struggling family than the potato. It was cheap by the sack. It kept all winter in a cool cellar, and it could become a dozen different suppers so that no one at the table ever felt they were eating the same poverty twice. Fried, mashed, baked, dropped into soup, grated into pancakes, layered into a scalloped dish with a little milk and onion. A pot of potato soup could feed a family for the price of a few coins. The potato never pretended to be fancy. It just quietly kept everyone alive and full. Rule number 11. They preserved the good days against the bad ones. This is the one I told you to wait for. And it is the habit most of us have completely lost. When food was cheap and plentiful, in the late summer when gardens came in and produce was almost free, a Depression family did not simply enjoy it. They put it up. They canned tomatoes and beans and peaches into jars that lined the cellar shelves. They made jam from bruised fruit nobody else wanted. They pickled, they dried, they salted. A summer glut became a winter pantry. While we let abundance rot in the crisper drawer, and then pay top dollar in February. They captured the cheap season and ate from it for months. That is the rule that beat the calendar, and it is why their shelves were full when the cupboard should have been bare. Rule number 12. They cooked once and ate for days. A wise depression cook did not light the stove for every single meal. Fuel cost money too, so she cooked in volume and she planned the encore. A big pot of beans on Monday became refried beans on Wednesday. A large baked dish stretched across several nights. Leftovers were not an afterthought to be forgotten in the back of the icebox. They were the plan. Every meal was cooked with the next one already in mind, so that one afternoon of work and one fire fed the family 2 or 3 times over. Rule number 13. Oatmeal was not just breakfast. To a depression cook, a box of rolled oats was one of the most versatile cheap foods in the house. Oats went into the meatloaf to stretch the meat. Oats thickened a thin soup. Oats and a little fat and sugar became cookies that gave the children something sweet for almost nothing. A handful of oats turned a small amount of real food into a meal that filled a working body. The store sells you a different expensive box for every one of those jobs now. She did all of it from a single cheap sack. Rule number 14. Nothing was ever truly finished. The genius of the depression kitchen was that a meal did not end when the plate was clean. The bones went to stock. The bacon fat went to the tin. The vegetable trimmings went to the soup pot. The sour milk became biscuits and pancakes instead of going down the drain. The last smear in the jam jar got a little hot water swirled in to sweeten a cup of tea. They ran every single ingredient all the way to the end of its life, because they understood that waste was the one luxury a poor family truly could not afford. We throw away nearly a third of the food we buy. They threw away almost nothing, and that one difference is worth more than any coupon ever printed. Rule number 15. They set the table anyway. This is the rule that cost nothing, and it mattered most of all. Money was short, the news was frightening, and every meal was a small victory pulled from very little. And so the women who ran those kitchens did something we have almost forgotten how to do. They made the meal feel like it mattered. The table was set. The family sat down together. The food, however humble, was served with a little pride and eaten without apology. A bowl of bean soup and a slice of bread, shared at a table where everyone belonged, fed something deeper than hunger. Their children did not grow up remembering they were poor. They grew up remembering that supper was warm and the family was whole. That was the real recipe, and no amount of money can buy it. So there they are. 15 rules that fed whole families through the hardest years this country ever faced, on a budget that would barely fill a cart today. Not one of them requires a coupon, an app, or a single thing the store wants to sell you. They require only the willingness to see food the way our grandmothers saw it, as something far too valuable to waste. Now I want to hear from you, because this is where the real wisdom lives. What is the one Depression-era food rule from your own family? The thing your grandmother or grandfather did that seemed strange to you as a child, but makes perfect sense now that times are tight again? Tell me in the comments. Someone reading needs to hear it. And if these rules meant something to you, subscribe and stay with us, because every week we bring back one more piece of the forgotten wisdom they tried to make us forget. Hard times built these habits. Let us make sure they are never lost again.